Yesterday, ordinary Korean student Kim Jae-cheol was suddenly thrust into the role of Kratos, the final boss of his favorite game. In the game Paladin of Blood, you had to wake up the ancient hero who had been sleeping for so long. The trouble was he realized he'd been reborn as a demon king in a land that was hopelessly outmatched. The doors swing open and a demon wearing glasses walks in to shout for Lord Kratos. Aide Zephyrus, a level 15 hero, arrived to share the exciting news that all the war preparations were finally done. The scene shows a terrifying demon army brandishing axes while flying dragons soar through the sky. Prince Azurat, who feeds on blood, was eager to satisfy his hunger with the new invasion he would launch today. The cold king Sergei sighed at his cruel fate of living in a barren land and eating his own people, yet believed the war coming was history in the making that would bring benefits to all. The Archduke of Mist gave a freezing command to his troops to rip humans apart and smash the elves. The tyrant of Blackrock, Baal, shouted that every enemy would become a meal for his hungry army. The army faced the demon king in Zephyrus, screaming for a bloodbath in a war that hadn't even started yet. Kratos screams with all his might so the demon army can hear him. The four captains locked eyes with him, silence hanging heavy as they waited for the demon king to speak. He finally declares that this war could never have happened under any circumstances. From that point forward, they halted their assault to focus on growing their strength. The thirsty generals are so stunned by the nonsense they hear that they start grumbling to the demon king. Kratos let out a roar of pure fear at how scary his own generals were, yet his terrifying face was so frightening that it made them all shake with terror. Far away from where the demons lived, a new message announced that the 21st game had begun. Aged Kimchi, a level 99/90 character who was once a sleeping enemy, finally wakes up. The king of demons saw he was too weak to fight and knew that if the war began, he would surely be killed by his own people. In a memory, we see a young Kim Jae-cheol, a brilliant student at Korea University who raced ahead of his classmates in their agriculture studies, dreaming of becoming a wealthy farmer. Being the top student meant he became a slave to the professors, who used his smart mind to write their own papers, finish their projects, and even help them plow the fields. He was so tired he couldn't stop wondering why he did all the hard work while the professors took all the glory. His brain was running on empty, and he was starting to lose his mind. The only way for him to get his dopamine fix was to conquer an insanely hard game where leveling up was a nightmare, a feat no one had achieved for the 19th time. He was so desperate to feel proud that he played straight through the night without a wink of sleep, climbing from level 1 all the way to level 10 to become the first player to slay the Demon King for the 19th time and earn the title of Paladin of Blood. Jae-cheol was wiped out from no sleep, yet he felt like a king because he knew he was the strongest person on Earth. For the 20th time, the game was set to be insanely hard, but he was unshakably confident he'd still level up because he was the strongest. On his hero panel, the game displayed his character's pink costume with bows and a tight skirt, looking just like a magical girl from a show such as Sailor Moon. He reached the top level of 9,999 and stopped training, forgetting exactly how long he'd been playing because it felt like years had gone by. A message popped up on the screen, asking if he really wanted to start his 20th time through the game. Without a second thought, he pushed the button to start. He gripped the controller tight, expecting another round of the game, but something fell off. The TV screen suddenly lit up with blue beams that started glowing all around him. Suddenly, an invisible force dragged his soul out of his mouth in a painful, scary way, leaving his body motionless and silent as a desperate scream got stuck in his throat with no help coming. He felt himself being pulled right through the television screen. His soul dropped from the sky like a bright blue shooting star. Jae-cheol, caught between a strange threshold, felt confusion wash over him as he fell into a world that made no sense and left him totally stunned. But he had to stay calm to figure it out, and since he was glowing blue, he knew it was his soul, which meant he probably wouldn't die if he hit the ground from that height. He spotted the life tower, proving he had truly stepped into the world of the Paladin of Blood. Happiness bloomed inside him as he realized his life of strength was only just starting, and he couldn't help but let out an uncontrollable laugh. As his floating spirit drifted closer to the unconscious body, his face suddenly brightened with the memory of the magical warrior outfit he had just put on him. He watched the muscular doll clutch a heart-shaped wand to its chest, and it seemed so absurd that he suddenly didn't want to turn into it anymore. At that exact same moment, with the same power as before, his soul was pulled in to possess the demon King Kratos, the final boss he had already beaten over and over again. The memory fades, leaving Kratos sitting on his throne, burning with frustration. If he hadn't thought that silly thing about aged kimchi, he'd have become the ultimate power, but instead, he had to be an idiot. So, As Zephyrus walked down the hall, he heard someone inside say that Kratos was growing weak. That was the reason he looked so terrified and shouted for the attacks to stop. Inside the room where the voices were heard, the four generals gathered as Asura suggested they unite to behead Kratos just as he had overthrown the old demon lord, promising that they would then split the throne's power among themselves. The Archduke of Mist warned them that if they were wrong and Kratos wasn't getting weaker, two of the four would surely get hurt or even die. Sergei suggested they might give a try, but only if Azurat stepped up to guard the group. Ball tells us he's starving. Azurat suggested that the demon lord might be getting weak, and Sergei agreed that if that's true, they must kill him. None of them hesitated, their faces twisted into demonic grins as they thirsted for it. Meanwhile, Zephyrus listened to every word from just outside the room. Later, Zephyrus came to Kratos with a scary report. The army's spirit had crashed, soldiers were turning on each other, and some were just vanishing into the demon land without a word. The four mighty demon generals raged in fury, declaring they would join forces to sever Kratos' head now that he had grown weak. And though Kratos sat calmly on his throne, worry deepened in his eyes as he realized that if they struck together, he would surely die. He realized that showing weakness meant certain failure, so he chose to enter the human world directly, knowing that without his special companion, he was nothing but a hollow shell. Then Zephyrus pulled out a glowing red ball, explaining it was a message from General Agmia that had come all the way from the dead paladin's tomb. In the video, the aged Kimchi pummels a demon who is begging him to stop. He stepped forward quietly, making the scared creature wonder what his next move would be. So aged Kimchi didn't hesitate and plunged his thumbs into the demon's eyes, causing a loud scream of pain that made Kratos break out in a cold sweat. That fight looked more like a crazy performance than a real battle, and he definitely didn't want to run into aged Kimchi. He had to hold his ground at any cost, for moving again would only make him look weak and get him killed by the four great demonic generals. But if he tried to run away to the human world, aged Kimchi would rip out his eyes and kill him just the same. He desperately wondered how he ended up in that game, where nothing made sense, and even happiness felt impossible to find. Then a plan sparked in his mind that might just buy him time, giving him a fighting chance to survive if he could feed himself and quiet the demons inside. Zephyrus watched Kratos walk away and, feeling puzzled, asked where he was heading, only for Kratos to apologize and explain that he needed to check out some fields for planting. Zephyrus, caught off guard by the polite words, couldn't stop his strange reaction from showing. He found Kratos' words grotesque and disturbing, as coming from such a narcissistic, arrogant, and ill-mannered man, and he preferred not to hear them again. While Kratos watched Zephyrus with strange suspicion, wondering what was wrong, if Zephyrus was trying to provoke him, or if he was always acting this way. In the memories, Zephyrus was a mysterious figure who showed up only once right before the final fight against the Demon King, leaving everyone confused until a flashback revealed that he had faced aged Kimchi while calmly telling the paladin to leave since the demon lord didn't want to fight. The moment he stopped talking, aged Kimchi pounced on him without a second's delay. Kneeling in defeat, Zephyrus whispered with regret that he hadn't been strong enough to protect his master. Thinking hard, Kratos realized Zephyrus had become a fan favorite among players, with many believing he was truly loyal to the demon lord. So when Zephyrus pointed out that losing such trust was something never seen before, Kratos just stared in silence, hiding his annoyance even though he knew Zephyrus was right but still found him impossible to stand. Zephyrus scribbled in his notepad with a calm smirk, mocking Kratos' plan to rule the demon lands by calling his memory as bad as a pigeon's, to which the indignant demon lord snapped at him for disrespect, only for Zephyrus to ignore the warning and keep writing, leaving Kratos furious and confused by his lack of fear. Now the two walked through the dry, dead land outside the palace, and Zephyrus remembered that both the old demon lord and Kratos had tried to grow crops there, knowing full well that the scorching heat and harsh conditions meant nothing could possibly survive. As they walked across the dry ground, Kratos noted that this place was known as the Land of Death, yet he felt confident his new powers could still save it. Inside, he hated the very thought of having to farm. Yet he had no choice but to work the soil with his own hands to stay alive while Zephyrus watched in confused silence. Acting on a wild instinct, Kratos grabbed a pinch of dry dust and shoved it into his mouth, only to choke instantly on how thirsty it was. Zephyrus calmly scribbled in his notepad that the demon lord had turned into a dirt-eating beggar, which made Kratos furious and demanding to know why he was writing, only for Zephyrus to coolly state he was just doing his duty of recording the demon lord's story while noting that Kratos' memory was getting worse, leaving Kratos seething with rage inside. Even then, one thing was sure. The ground there was completely empty of any nourishment. Kratos' mind raced on, driven by a desperate need for a simple, life-saving answer: nitrogen. Although nitrogen fills the air and is vital for plants, its atoms lock together so tightly in triple bonds that the plants can't simply grab it. Then, humans cracked the code of nature by using chemistry to turn air into food, sparking a massive boom in how much we could grow. But that was impossible, for there was nothing there to build on. The only way out was to tap into nature's own lightning-powered nitrogen fixers. The powerful lightning bolt split the air, turning nitrogen into nitrite that washed down with the rain and soaked into the earth. Then it was as if a light switched on in Kratos' mind, and he realized this was the true heart of his main skill, remembering the time he fought as the old man Kimchi against Kratos himself. During that fight, he watched as Kratos slashed the back of his hands with his claws, spilling blood and sending a violent burst of electricity through the air in a move called the Bloody Strike. That day, he had been beaten by a terrifying strike that hurled lightning and heavy rain all at once. Kratos warned Zephyrus to step back without a second's thought, but the other man didn't understand, only watching with curiosity. He started digging his sharp claws into his own hand until blood began to pour out. The pain hit hard and fast, making it hard to believe anyone would use such a crazy trick so often. Right then, Kratos saw dark shapes hiding behind a dead tree. The four generals waited in the shadows with hungry eyes on him, while his own mind whispered over and over that he had grown weak. Scared, Kratos screamed out, while Zephyrus coldly confirmed what everyone already knew, forcing Kratos to realize this was a trap set by the assassin to provoke and kill him. But he decided that facing that danger was better than just waiting for death. He moved forward, digging his nails into his own hand even harder. Blood poured from his arm in sharp pain, yet it hit the dry earth and vanished without making a single ripple. He pressed down on the wound to stop the blood, but right then, a voice called out to him from behind. One of the generals stepped forward to ask if he felt sick, while the others grinned and readied their weapons. Kratos stared at them, his heart pounding with fear, knowing he had nowhere left to run. The scene shifted as aged Kimchi watched the horizon, where the human world ended and the forgotten land of demons began. Something felt familiar to him, like he'd lived this same life over a dozen times, blindly following a path pulled by an invisible force until that call to duty suddenly went quiet, leaving him staring at his own hand in silence, wondering what was left to live for. Above his shadow, the screen flashed with a title: Aged Kimchi NPC, level 9990. Then Kimchi just turned around and walked on his own way, without any reason to keep going forward. Kratos faced the demon generals, who wore frightening smiles. Asura asked Kratos about the demon's rule, telling him that the demon lord is the one with the most power. Kratos broke into a cold sweat, staring at the terrifyingly strong group around him, realizing he couldn't even use his powers and fearing he was about to die. Asura was baffled to see the demon lord shaking before the battle began, realizing that the sheer pressure of the demon lord's gathering strength was already making his own body tremble. But a sly grin spread across his face. Then he wondered if he was strong enough to beat the four generals right now. Asura turned and saw the other generals had run away to hide behind the dry tree once more. The shock made him quietly wonder why that had happened. Meanwhile, the generals watched from a distance, ready to jump in only if they saw a real chance to win. Asura started to feel scared just thinking about standing alone against Kratos. Suddenly, Zephyrus stepped in, loudly insisting that demons always fight to the death with no chance to quit, which shocked everyone and left Kratos panicking, while Asura tried to argue, but it was already too late. Asura gripped his weapon tight to fight back the shaking in his mind, knowing his weakened foe was finally his chance, while Kratos froze in pure panic, unable to figure out what to do next. For a second, he remembered lifting the throne with his bare hands during a strength test, and then he realized the truth. He was strong, but not strong enough to brag about it. Asura charged forward so fast that Kratos was caught off guard, but the very next moment, something clicked in his mind. He was sure he'd faced that hit before, but he wasn't certain anymore. Just as the blow came down, Kratos slipped out of the way. Even though he didn't understand how it happened right away, the memory suddenly came back. He recognized that sudden move from back when he used to play. Kratos recalled that when the attack began, Asura's left foot was turned outward. It was a clear sign that the attack came straight at him, just like a move he knew from the game, and that's exactly what saved his life. Hartok told Sergei that Kratos looked ready to rip off an enemy arm while dodging, but Sergei asked why he didn't, and they kept watching as Asura attacked again, and Kratos dodged perfectly once more. He started to wonder in his head what was going on, realizing that every move Asura made was just like the one in the game. The memory pulled him back to the days when he was still a man, playing the old character Kimchi for the very first time against Asura in that game. Right then, he was totally blown away and started wondering if that enemy could actually be taken down. He moved fast, landed surprising blows, and could strike from many different angles. It took 128 tries to finally kill him, even though he had already died 100 times before. For the next 19 games, he completely flipped the script and left his opponent humiliated by winning nonstop without taking even a single hit. Asura tried to attack Kratos again, but it failed, and as Kratos dodged every blow with ease, he felt a wild joy grow inside him, laughing at Asura's frustration since none of her hits could land. The other three generals started to feel worried. They saw that Kratos wasn't just winning. He was having fun, laughing at Asura's failed attempts while feeding on his misery. As Asura ground his teeth in frustration, Kratos felt a surge of relief, knowing that while victory wasn't certain, he had finally realized that the world outside followed the same rules as the game he understood so well. Suddenly, a glowing blue window popped up in front of him, showing his name as Kim Jae-cheol and proving he had finally grasped one of that world's most important rules. He was surprised to see a balloon floating there, just like the ones he used to see in webtoons. Shortly after, a new message popped up telling him he had successfully dodged enemy attacks with intense focus. Asura surged forward at breakneck speed, driven by wild rage, straight for Kratos. Suddenly, a new message popped up for Kratos, telling him that the section of the system meant for playable characters had just opened up. Soon after, another alert popped up to show the aiming was on, leaving Kratos shocked as a dot suddenly appeared in his view to tell him exactly where he was looking. He instantly knew it was the power behind special abilities, so without a second's doubt, he slashed his own hands with his claws to draw blood, flung it into the air to summon a ball of electricity that struck Asura dead center, and the result was instant. From afar, the generals watched with wide eyes, their faces mixing shock and nervous fear. The demons watching the fight started cheering loudly and praising Kratos with great excitement. Asura knelt before Kratos, his scorched and tattered clothes barely hiding a body still crackling with sparks from fresh electrical wounds. Smoke curled up from the burns on his skin. Kratos stared in shock, realizing he was still alive after a hit that would have killed anyone else, knowing Asura's incredible healing power meant she'd be back on her feet soon, so he had no time to waste. He didn't wait. He blasted the same power over and over again, leaving no time for anyone to react. The three generals watched in terrified silence as Kratos didn't try to kill Asura right away, but instead tore him apart to make sure he could never heal. Asura hit the ground, swallowed by thick smoke and left completely helpless, but somehow he didn't die. Suddenly, a strange message popped up for Kratos, telling him that every piece of Asura's clothes had vanished and he was left standing there completely naked. Surprise washed over him as he realized the strange and awkward message, but before he could do anything, a new notification popped up telling him that a special system to strip armor from his inventory had just been unlocked. Kratos tapped the floating screen to check his armor, only to sigh in disappointment when he saw it was bare except for what he already wore. He looked at Asura, realized he couldn't kill him because of Asura's strong healing, and decided he had to get rid of him before Asura recovered. Right then, a thought struck him. As long as Asura still breathed, he could be the one to finish the job. He decided to keep throwing his bloody attacks, realizing that if he kept hitting the ground with such force, it would be covered in nitrogen and finally become the perfect soil to fix the barren land, filling him with wild confidence that he had finally solved the problem. Kratos stared at the generals, his body shaking, wondering if their fear was of him, so he decided to find out. He gave Sergi a call, got the green light that she was listening, and then told her to tie Asura up tight. Sergi was shocked, thinking Sergi was trying to humiliate both him and Asura by making her tie up a naked man, and the first step of their plan was to prepare the lightning rod. Asura lay tied with his arms stretched out, unconscious until a jolt of electricity woke him, and he immediately felt a burning rage, convinced his enemy was weak and ready to take his head. Kratos smashed into Asura one more time with blood and fury, kicking off the next part of his plan. With this plan, he hoped to turn the nitrogen in the air into nitrite. Then he gave Hartok a clear order, and Hartok, after a brief pause to wonder if Kratos wanted to make the air wetter to make the lightning stronger, decided the idea was clever and well thought out. Hartok crossed his arms to summon a thick mist that would blanket the whole area, setting the stage to spread it and launch his attack again. Kratos kept raining down blows, even as the blood he used to power them tore him apart. The generals stood silent in awe as they watched the non-stop flurry of strikes. Kratos was so mesmerized by the eerie dance of nature that he dreamed of turning the barren land into rich soil with nitrogen, and the thought of a bountiful harvest made him laugh as he kept unleashing storms of mist, lightning, and blood in a wild, endless show. After a while, he paused his strikes and scooped up a handful of dirt. He decided that keeping with his nitrogen-rich soil plan was enough for now, and that his next big move would be to fix the land's quality, especially since he knew loose, unstructured dirt let neither air nor water pass through properly. For growing plants, the best kind of dirt is loose and crumbly, like small grains. So he realized the only thing he could make to help the plants grow was fertilizer. Kratos looked at the three generals, whose faces were already stained with his own spilled blood, and commanded them to bring him, and they froze instantly. For a heartbeat, they couldn't believe what they'd just heard. Then they realized the cruelty behind the order to torture Azurat, and now dirty a demon. The scene shifts to a lively forest teeming with life and thick green plants. Old Kimchi walked on silently until he heard voices coming from behind a bush. Moving quietly forward, he spotted two men begging for help. One of them had a broken leg held steady by sticks and told us they had been attacked by goblins. So both begged for our help and promised rewards if we helped them. Aged Kimchi just watched them in silence without saying a word, making them even more nervous. Even though he said he wasn't dangerous, the two couldn't shake the feeling that this stranger was anything but trustworthy. Without waiting for anyone to respond, aged Kimchi grabbed the injured man and hoisted him onto his shoulders, then pointed toward the other man to show him the way to go. The man nodded, and the three of them stepped into the forest, where the wounded stranger introduced himself as Rivage Ashuran, an emissary, his servant as Dial Frontura, and asked who was helping them along the way. Aged Kimchi's reply was simple, yet full of mystery. He still had to find this out for himself. Back at the demon stronghold, the three commanders looked completely fed up. Hartok asked how they were supposed to just magically poop on command. Sergi shouted in sheer panic, feeling overwhelmed and horrified as he spiraled out of control. Ball confessed he hadn't eaten in ages and couldn't help. Guess Sergi was just as empty, and she snapped at him for bringing it up. Hartok, who didn't want to give up his own trash, decided to force the weaker demons to do it for him instead. Soon after, a desperate creature in a demonic village begged them not to go further, saying he couldn't relieve himself while being watched and pleading for them to step outside. Another soldier replied that they had asked before but got nothing, so Hartok grew impatient and just wanted results. He told the demon that no matter how hard they tried, nothing would change, and the creature admitted it hadn't eaten in days. Hartok grabbed the demon with a frustrated roar, channeling his strength, and then gave the poor creature a grateful nod for the lucky idea it just gave him. He struck him, and the blow made him cry out in pain. The attack stopped suddenly when Ball stepped in and grabbed Hartok's wrist. Hartok asked why the interruption happened. Ball explained that stabbing the demons would kill them and ruin the only way to get the waste they need to stay alive. Hartok freed the demon and, much to everyone's surprise, praised Ball's sharp thinking, even though it came from someone like him. But he followed up with a chilling threat. Feed the villagers Ball's flesh to make the production go up. Ball was ready to strike back, and the trapped demon shivered as the tension grew thicker. Just as Hartok and Ball were about to clash, a mighty roar filled the air from Kratos, demanding they explain why. One fierce blow knocked both down, and he shouted in anger that humans weren't the only creatures who needed to use the bathroom. He told them that poop without nutrients is useless, so they needed waste that could actually make good compost. Zephyros, puzzled by the idea, asked what compost really meant. Kratos explained that this special soil food was made from wood ash, weeds, dirt, eggshells, and chicken waste, and while they could reuse the ash and weeds from their old homes, they still had trouble finding the eggshells and bird poop. Suddenly, a memory popped up, and he told Zephyros to go grab the map of the territory. As soon as it was spread out on the table, he knew he was right. It was the exact same setup he had seen inside the game. So as long as he got to that spot, he'd find what he was looking for. He was talking about where those terrible sea birds build their nests. In the game, huge flocks of them swarmed the land, eating the people's crops and leaving their waste and eggs all over the place. Kratos thought it was a perfect spot, and Zephyros nervously asked if the Demon King really meant to collect trash from the seagulls, which Kratos admitted was exactly right. Zephyros then spoke the name of the place, the Cliff of No Return, a dangerous drop with nowhere to rest, where anyone who fell would be swept away by violent tides. Kratos admitted he knew the dangers, but that dark spot stayed out of reach because there was no way to get in. In this world, he was sure he could rise to meet the challenge. As soon as you stepped onto the shore, you were hit by a harsh reality where giant waves smashed against massive stone pillars. The commanders were so confused by their liege's plan that they remembered how every past hunter had been destroyed by the sea's fury while chasing those seabirds. Kratos explained his plan. He would climb the cliff and drop a sack of poop and eggshells, telling his generals to make sure it lands perfectly. If we pull this off, everyone gets to eat. Ball stood silent, thinking back to the skinny demon Hartak had killed and the thin ghosts walking the streets. The waves kept crashing over and over with no sign of stopping. Just as Kratos was about to jump, memories of his 13th playthrough flashed before his eyes. He had tried every trick in the book to reach the top, surviving hundreds of near-death failures. But now he finally leaped with the generals in Zephyros watching closely. He never doubted himself, because he'd already beaten this challenge by finding a secret trick in the game. He gripped the sharp rock so hard that his fingers left a deep mark in the cliff. The commanders in Zephyros stood frozen in shock. Kratos didn't hesitate. He pulled up his inventory and stripped off every single piece of clothing he was wearing. They stood frozen, unable to move or speak, because what they saw was too amazing to believe. All he could see were his hair, flexed arm muscles, rear, and parts of his form. The group couldn't stop themselves from laughing at the silly sight. Kratos pushed hard against the ledge, twisting his body to turn. Sergi's face turned red, and she looked away. As she turned away, her eyes still glanced back with a curious glint, showing she was secretly fascinated by the demon lord's strange appearance. Kratos spun around, stripping his clothes off to show his bareback side, then twisted back on and put his gear on again, keeping up this silly loop of rolling and dressing while climbing higher toward the top. Finally reaching the top, Kratos stood firm on the cliff's edge, having figured out the game's hidden rules through trial and error, while the demon lord's Ball promised food to help him cross before Zephyros tried to stop him. But Ball was already charging forward, ready to follow the king. Zephyros' cries pulled Kratos right out of his thoughts. In a split second, Ball jumped up, trying to act just like his leech. But the rocky surface offered no grip, and Ball began to plummet. Luckily, Kratos reached out and grabbed him right before he hit the ground. Right then, Kratos stood bare-chested, clinging desperately to Bale's weight, only his upper body visible from behind the stone ledge. To make it work, he had to trigger the same glitch that let him pass before, even as his forearm veins swelled from the strain and Bale's crushing weight felt like it was trying to rip his limbs apart. He wondered inside why he should save a general like Ball, who could threaten his rule, instead of just letting the four mighty men disappear. He spoke out his inner struggle, saying he felt no duty to save Ball. As Kratos held onto the general, his thoughts drifted back to a moment when a friend with red eyes and a shaking voice had asked for his help. The professor said no to the student's paper because he wanted to keep using him for free work forever. The young man begged Kratos to talk to the professor, hoping the respected scholar would listen to Jan Coel, his favorite student whom the youth deeply admired, thinking that since the professor was already the hardest worker, he might finally change his mind. Fear took hold of him because he was terrified of losing his job and falling out of favor. He told the boy it wasn't his problem and turned to leave. And ever since he asked himself, what if he had stepped in or tried a little harder? If he had pushed himself to the absolute edge, the face haunting his memories might have been smiling instead of full of sorrow. Now that same feeling surged through him as Ball held on tight, and in that split second of danger, Kratos decided he would finally do what he couldn't do back then. He gritted his teeth, held his ground, and screamed as loud as he possibly could. His bones creaked and ached as he pushed himself to the limit. He used all his strength to lift the general up and toss Ball over the cliff. A giant figure slammed down hard onto the rocky ground. Meanwhile, Kratos held his broken arm while pain showed in his stance, and Ball, shocked, watched his king hurt himself. Ball was so moved that he asked the demon lord why he had taken such a risk for no reason at all. Kratos stood silent for a while. Then, with quiet solemnity, he gave his reason. Choosing to stay and care for those who needed him was far less painful than leaving them behind and living with the regret of abandoning them. The Ball wobbled as tears filled his eyes. In Kratos' mind, doing the act felt like redemption, something he should have done for that pleading junior. The heavy feeling that he should have helped those in trouble never left him, even when he traveled to other worlds. Just then, a ghostly message popped up on the screen. It said that even though he wasn't used to the Demon King Kratos' ship yet, he gave every bit of strength he had. Because of this, he earned Bale's true respect and became one of the four highest leaders. Kratos finally felt how much they truly cared for him. To celebrate this big moment, the system unlocked a new perk where giving the army a shared sense of deep happiness rewards him with a huge pile of points. He thought about the large amount, and the system quickly told him that his happiness points were now being counted up. Kratos wondered what a happiness point was, guessing it might be a coupon for frozen treats. But the annoyed system shot him down by asking what kind of fantasy world would even offer ice cream, which startled him and showed that the system could hear his thoughts. It turned out that every time a demon soldier ate its fill, Kratos gained a happiness point to make himself stronger, but right now, he only had 1/5 of the Demon Lord's power. He realized his own weakness compared to his team, but the system pushed him to master all 5 traits and unleash the Demon Lord's true power. Kratos was eager to test his new ability to boost stamina, but a system message told him it would cost 50 happiness points, a steep price he wasn't sure he could afford, especially since upgrading his Blood Strike skill would require an even bigger sum of 250 points, forcing him to realize he'd have to work hard to farm those points and grow stronger if he wanted any chance of surviving. Along with that surprising news, he also got a gift he never asked for, a warm feeling of thanks. He wore a secret smile as he quietly savored this special moment. From Bale's point of view, the Demon Lord's face looked more like a silent warning that debts must be paid and rebellion leads to death, making him seem like a cruel boss who kills without mercy rather than a protector who saves lives out of kindness. Soon after, the Demon Lord picked up a giant eggshell and called everyone's attention. He said he'd stuff the shell with trash and throw it at them, leaving the 3 of them standing there in shock and totally lost on what to do next. True to his word, the Demon Lord threw the box open. The contents of the bomb flew at the shocked crowd, creating a chaotic mess that caught the 3 generals off guard right before they thought they had hit their breaking point. Kratos thought this was just the start and insisted everyone pour all their energy into farming. They had to mix the seabird droppings, broken eggshells, burnt wood bits, and well-turned earth together until everything was completely blended. He called Sergi in for the job and told her to smash the stuff up and then mix it all together. Sergi was shocked because the order felt like too much for her to give. Even though her mini arms made her perfect for the job, she was furious, declaring she was the cold queen and refused to do menial tasks like making compost. But Kratos' intense look stopped her and offered her a simpler job instead. He pointed her toward Asura, who was still smoking slightly from the electric shock, and told her all she had to do was stand still, which seemed like an easy task. So the Grand King of Ice was forced to become an unhappy mix-up with rotting leaves. Rumors claimed she still held that title, but inside Kratos was teetering on the edge, knowing these generals were so hot-tempered that a single wrong move could bring disaster. But then he remembered his role as the demon's sovereign and pressed forward with sheer will, realizing it was time to add moisture. So he ordered Hardtack to fill the air with mist, only for Hardtack to refuse, arguing that the added humidity would make the terrible smell even worse, and he had no wish to follow such a disgusting order. Kratos pulled out his secret weapon one last time, locking his gaze directly on Asurat. Since nobody wanted to carry the electricity, Asurat darted through the air to spread the moisture around. Kratos asked Baal if there was enough water, and Baal confirmed that the mix had softened exactly as their leader had expected. Finally, the third step asked to move the compost to a dry, shady spot and cover it with a layer of seagull feathers, but a new problem was waiting. The Demon Lord knew that even making just a little of this stuff would take up a lot of time. To feed such a vast land, he knew he had to unleash every demon at his command, and though something weighed heavily on him, his duty left no choice but to move forward with the royal power he held. Later that night, in a dark corner of the demon realm, a small wooden shed appeared with 2 evil creatures inside, one of whom was lying on a rough bed. The young demon girl named Flute lay there and cried out to her dad, who asked in a soft voice what had happened. Tears filled her eyes as she begged her father to eat her, but he was so angry at such a dark idea that he scolded her and told her never to speak those hopeless words again. But the girl, still hurting over her missing mother, kept speaking until her words felt like a wound of their own. Then, the story jumped back in time to show a terrifying monster that once tried to eat the little child. Just as the huge mouth was about to swallow her, she screamed for help, and a stranger stepped forward to protect her small body. It turned out to be her own mother. Before she could even blink, the giant monster swallowed the mother whole so her daughter could live. Right now, her father spoke softly, saying that without her, he had no reason to stay alive. A quiet, serious conversation between them was suddenly broken by loud noises coming from outside. When Kratos and his men showed up, Flute's father went stiff with fear, his voice shaking as he stared at the Demon Lord. Kratos realized the demon was still alive from his reaction, so he ordered his capture. The father begged, saying there was no one else to look after his child, and that if he left her alone, she would fall into the hands of stronger demons. The Flute cried out, pleading to let her father go, but the Demon Lord stood firm, then looked to Zephyros for their progress, and Zephyros confirmed they had caught 20 demons, but needed 30 more to reach their goal. As Kratos turned to leave the house, his eyes found the girl once more. She kept crying, sure she was about to lose another parent. Inside the game, she was known as a crazy, demon-like enemy who had lost her mind. He hammered his controller buttons in a panic to unleash a quick slash meant to take her out. Her eyes held the exact same look as before, which briefly made him feel something, but as the Demon King, he knew that feelings had no place in his rules. Even though he kept his cool face, he gave a last order before leaving. Stop all of the demon family from eating each other, and tell Zephyros to gather everyone else to start making fertilizer right away. Finally, the hero took on the heavy weight of leading, embracing both the glory and the sacrifice it demanded. Days later, the demon conscripts started working hard in the fields, using their weapons as rough shovels to turn over the rich soil. While Dyrok, Flute's father, scoffed at their hard work as silly and pointless, a friend warned him that talking like that might cost him his head. But Dyrok stood his ground, saying their fate was already written no matter what, since even if they found good soil, they had no seeds to plant. Just as the critiques seemed to call him, Kratos appeared and challenged their future planting plans with a question, leaving Dyrok to realize he had spoken too soon and was now in deep trouble. The Demon King ordered him to come along. Dyrok didn't know that Kratos had already found the answer days ago. Just when his high-ranking officers had turned against him, he found himself drawn to a single violet flower. He knew right away that this was a plant worth growing. So, he led Dyrok up to stand right in front of that very flower. Kratos told him they were about to plant the plant's roots, and Ball, along with a team from the farming group, had already gone out to gather samples from all over. Dyrok, now shaking with fear, gently warned that the flower's root was poisonous and could cause terrible pain or even death if eaten. The demon sovereign ripped the flower from the earth and declared that it was the only thing they had left. The test to see if it's safe to eat should be done by now, he said, leaving Dyrok in shock at what he'd just learned. His calmness nearly broke as Dyrok, filled with panic, rushed to his daughter and screamed in desperation, asking the demon lord why he let such a cruel test happen to an innocent child. He begged to be let off because he didn't want his daughter to eat those roots. Dyrok burst into their home and froze, seeing Flute looking much better and happily eating the roots without any pain. Dyrok shook with fear and asked if she really felt okay. Flute confirmed she had taken the food Zephyros and Ball gave her the day before, and she felt perfectly fine. Just then Kratos stepped back into the room and asked Dyrok if he had finally learned to trust him, reminding him that people from far away once did the same thing by turning this poisonous plant into safe food and ending their hunger. With a wicked grin stretching across his face, the Demon King revealed the truth. The plant he had unleashed was now known in the human world as the potato. The Flute gazed upward and spoke from the heart, thanking Kratos for caring about someone as small as her. Right then, a shimmering message appeared before the Demon King because the system had finally noticed him. With the demons well-fed and Kratos earning his first happy point, the counter ticked up while a display showed the new total, leaving Kratos stunned as he looked again at a beaming Flute. Then, a memory surfaced from when he was just a player. It was that very Flute, the innocent demon child in the game who had been forced to do terrible things just to stay alive. The picture from back then looked nothing like the scene standing right in front of him now. A faint smile slowly touched Kratos' face as he realized that even as a demon lord, he didn't have to wear a serious mask all the time. He offered a crooked, maybe even scary grin that was actually real, thinking that a little demon girl just needed good food to grow strong. But his helpers got it wrong and thought he was plotting to eat her, while the Demon King's smile was just the one he always wanted people to see, even though it was a total lie. After those events, it turned out that the farthest corner of the Demon Lord's vast realm was called Chavinda Anti. The whole area was split into 5 parts, and this icy stretch hid away in the most hidden sector. By night the air bit like ice, but by day it burned like a furnace, just like the harsh high peaks of the Andes where ancient people once ate poisonous roots to survive, proving that human cleverness could turn danger into food, a skill now being copied by Yahello, who has become the powerful demon sovereign known as Kratos. Shortly after, Dyrok stepped forward to tell the Demon King that the tuberous roots were already spread out across the fields. Kratos ordered Ball to crush them right back. Ball didn't even think twice before shooting up into the sky and crashing down so hard that his weight crushed the roots right beneath him. With the weight of the world pressing down on them, those potatoes had no hope of staying whole. Ball still had a lot of work left to do, repeating the same task all day long under Kratos' careful plan, which required freezing the roots for 5 nights in a row under the cold sky. Then, under the scorching sun, they would be softened and crushed by Baal's mighty force to melt and freeze again, pounding away the poison until it vanished, leaving only dried, preserved scraps that were gently warmed up for eating. And so the Demon Realm's version of Chinyo was born from wild potatoes. But the story quickly shifted back to Kratos, who called upon Zephyros to gather his team of fertilizer-making demons. With a wicked grin, the Demon Lord announced it was snack time and hoped his minions would really enjoy the feast. As the distribution began, the demons lined up for their share, but Kratos announced that with so little left, everyone would only get 2 pieces. Zephyrus asked if they could make more food since there were so many potatoes left, but Kratos shook his head and said there just wasn't enough to feed everyone in the Legion. He didn't eat all the tubers. Instead, he planted them back so they could grow and multiply quickly. Soon as the wild potato portions were handed out, the farming squad hesitated, staring at the strange food with worried eyes while heavy thoughts of their lost families weighed on them. Dyrok tried to calm everyone by saying the Demon King had made the roots safe to eat, but a silly demon with a weird haircut laughed at him for being naive and pointed at Kratos, claiming the dark figure was up to no good and probably trying to poison them. Dyrok didn't give up and bravely took a bite. Everyone watched him chew, holding their breath until he finally swallowed it with a relaxed look. He cried out praise for the Demon King, tears rolling down his face. Seeing Dyrok still alive, the other workers quickly finished their food, then rushed to form a new line to get more. Dyrok stood tall with pride, truly feeling vindicated as he realized the Demon Lord had actually given them food to eat. The demon with strange hair began to sway as he started leading a chant. Raising his left arm, he bellowed with enthusiasm, "Yes, Kratos," while the Demon King remained unimpressed by the awkward slogan and silently planned to swap it for something better later. From the side, Zephyrus watched Kratos' face and saw a deep, unshakable faith that even in this empty wasteland he could grow real food, a sign that Kratos might finally break the endless cycle of hunger and hopelessness that had haunted them. Suddenly, the screen flashed back to life with a message saying that 50 members of Kratos' farming team had just finished their meal, earning the group a huge 50-point bonus for their well-fed squad. The new score of 51 points flashed boldly, and the protagonist watched the scene unfold with a grin. A small smile spread across his face as he realized his points were finally enough to get stronger, though he still couldn't decide which power to choose, and might as well save them for later. While Zephyrus organized his teams, he rallied the workers by promising that anyone who dug up wild potatoes in this barren land would get special food coupons for Chino. The news sent the farming team into a joyful celebration, while Kratos quietly studied Zephyrus, thinking that even though the guy was annoying, he was truly as smart as he looked and one of the most useful friends they had. Thanks to this campaign, the village demons worked hard to dig up every wild potato, while Surge ground fertilizer and Hartok made it rain. And even though Asura was tied up waiting to be moved, Kratos simply adjusted his lightning conductor before finally striking the target with electric bolts to enrich the soil using Asurat's strength. He worked hard to mix the soil well and started spreading the compost, but the land was so huge that a small team, barely fed on a few scraps of Chino, couldn't cover all. Suddenly, Asurat gathered all his strength to beg the Demon Lord for a quick end, but his plea was ignored and another shock hit him instead, while Kratos realized in his mind that killing a foe who could keep fighting even when starving was a silly mistake because of his healing power. He thought the nitrogen was free, yet the worry of growing his land kept him stuck, and the Demon King wondered if sending more troops was his only choice. Before, he told Zephyrus to ask the Star Masters for help. Zephyrus wrote a strict order to stop all fighting and focus on farming, but even though he sent this message to every corner of the Star region, no one answered. Kratos grew worried, wondering if the messenger had starved before delivering his message, and feared that without fast growth of the fields, a big trouble was coming. While things were happening elsewhere in the Demon Realm, the first star zone, known as the Cliff of the Dead, was developing on its own. A servant knelt before his boss to share the news that the evil Lord Kratos had really started farming and managed to grow food that people could eat. The master of this domain sighed, believing Kratos acted out of fear of himself. This scary old guy, who grew stronger every time a demon died, thought Kratos was trying to stop the fighting and hunger just so he wouldn't get any bigger. His name was Saruthal, the boss of the First Star region and the dad of the dead. It was revealed that his underling had already caught and killed the messengers sent to the other star sectors. Ultimately, no help for the demons could reach Saruthal's lands because the cruel overlord was determined to let them starve to death so he could eat their bodies. Saruthal vowed to wipe out Kratos and take the demon throne for himself. He gave his trusted aide, Fakamer, an important and urgent order. Saruthal spoke with a dark voice to declare war, giving a simple but terrible command: destroy every sign of Kratos' farming. Fakamer could barely sit still, his heart pounding with thrill at the chance to fight. Back at the lightning conductor's spot, Asura shook with fear as a sharp wind howled through the place. Fakamer finally admitted that Kratos was terribly cruel for turning Asurat into a barely breathing shell just to scare others. He then told Asurat not to worry, promising that his boss Saruthal loved his boldness and would welcome him back as soon as Kratos was gone. Fakamer called upon his special team of ghostly creatures called Wraiths. He shouted orders with wild excitement to destroy the ruined wasteland, and the ghost soldiers happily rushed in to start their terrifying destruction. One of them found a compost on the ground, and Fakamer, as usual, laughed with delight and told them to toss the waste all over the place. He figured the enemy might try to steal the manure back, so he told the Wraiths to spread it all over the ground with such fierce, blind energy that they mixed it into the dirt until not a single piece could be found. Fakamer's wild laughter filled the air as Asurat stared in stunned silence, finally just sighing in defeat while remembering how Kratos had ordered them to grind the manure and mix it deep into the ground, a task Fakamer was unknowingly completing with happy ignorance. Asurat wondered what these fools were up to, and the next morning, even as a Wraith complained that their task never ended, his co-workers stayed busy because they feared that if even one spot of the land went unworked, the demon King Kratos would turn it into a field. The lazy Wraith then asked why the notoriously slacker Wraith number 2718 was working so hard that day. The ghost with the number on his back admitted he was usually lazy, but he said something felt strange this time. Watching the perfectly tilled soil, he felt a deep sense of pride, as if he had helped create something truly special. The lazy Wraith stood stunned until he clicked his tongue in annoyance and declared himself a fool for the day. He kept working the soil right alongside everyone else, but then out of nowhere, everything changed. The Wraiths were so busy working that they completely forgot how much time had passed. As the morning sun rose and the last of them fell, they died happy with their work done, turning the empty land into a garden, leaving only Fakamer as the last ghost standing. Tears filling his eyes, he mourned his proud comrades, silently hoping their souls found peace while wondering how Kratos would react to what they had done. In the barn where the potatoes were kept, Kratos could be heard muttering that tilling had taken much longer than he expected. He looked at the sleepy vegetables and told Zephyrus that potatoes in this state wouldn't grow because they were like tubers that were suddenly pulled from the earth, shocked and frozen in time. Kratos sat deep in thought, figuring that keeping the potatoes cool for a few weeks before moving them to a warm, dark spot would wake them up much faster. He wanted to ask Sergi to use her Frostborn magic to cool them down, but she was too angry to help, and Hardtack couldn't be trusted either. Kratos knew that angering both at once would be a terrible mistake, so he had to find another way. As a last resort, the Demon King made the farming squad do physical drills near the potato cache to warm them up with their body heat, but they got tired so fast that the plan failed. So the problem stayed stuck, with no answer in sight. With no other choices left, Kratos marched toward the distant fields to do all he could, aiming simply to soak the soil with nitrogen. A moment later, Kratos stood quietly before the earth that had been completely turned over and made rich with life. The dirt had been turned over and mixed in so well. The smell was so thick and strong in the air that Asurat passed out from the fumes. The demon lord stood frozen in shock, whispering to himself that the sudden readiness of the fields could only be a miracle. Suddenly, the same fool who had unknowingly helped create the miracle burst into loud laughter and gloated about their success, but his bragging didn't last long. Baal, the shadowy giant looming behind him, effortlessly hoisted Fakamer, the notorious boss from the Dead Cliff who had been trying to stay hidden, and presented him to the demon lord, and Kratos, recognizing the man instantly, guessed that Fakamer must have come as backup. Kratos instantly demanded to know why Fakamer was there, and the demon instantly froze in fear. Before Fakamer could speak, Kratos struck him with a quick hit. Bewildered, Zephyrus couldn't understand why the demon lord would attack before getting an answer. But Kratos explained that keeping secrets was already suspicious and that sometimes the best way to get answers was to just force them out. Fakamer admitted with a wince that a demon king would act this way, but he stayed silent until he was punched so hard he finally passed out while Kratos fought on until he was out of breath. Then, a message from the game appeared, reminding Kratos that he could use his health points to make himself stronger. With 51 points to spend, he chose to strengthen his stamina. Feeling fresh and strong again, he went back to hitting the poor demon even harder, landing thousands of blows. In this cruel interrogation, Kratos proved he was truly fit to be a demon king until Fakamer finally snapped and confessed to his actions and the plot to kill Kratos. The plan went back to Saruthal, who had purposely cut off the reinforcements. The plan was to get tougher as more demons went hungry, but Zephyrus called this sabotage an act of rebellion. He told Kratos that killing Saruthal would send a loud message to everyone angry about the stopped expeditions. However, Kratos knew that even if he defeated Saruthal, other enemies would still be out there, so he needed a real way to stop them for good. Zephyrus said Saruthal was not just any foe. Kratos knew the truth. Saruthal could turn ghost-like and vanish, making his deadly chase across the cliffs of Dead an endless nightmare from the very start. Kratos was already hatching a plan. Like in the game, if the pests were too well hidden to kill, the answer was simple: drag them out of their den. Far away, Fluke stood right in front of Aserat. She looked up with a nervous glance, and just being near her made him visibly angry. She nodded shyly and thanked him, saying his sacrifice was the only reason they had any food to eat. But telling a demon he was noble was so insulting that Aserat felt his blood boil. He blamed Fluke for mocking him and threatened her life, which scared her into running away, while Aserat stared angrily and promised revenge with pure fury. As soon as he gets away, he will hunt Kratos down and take him apart. Just when he found a moment of peace, a chorus of evil voices suddenly joined in a song aimed right at him. From far away, he watched as Kratos came closer, a waving banner held high. As the picture sharpened, the banner's words finally came into focus, reading second conductor of thunder in the department. Walking beside him was Fikamer, tied up just like Aserat, and this crazy group sang happy songs as if they were celebrating a new worker joining their farming team, which was slowly growing bigger every day. Aserat sat deep in thought, wondering about the heavy title of becoming the second conductor of thunder. Water filled his eyes as he imagined the freedom from being a bird roasted forever on a spit. But in an instant, Fikamer stood right next to him, and no one thought to take him down from the pole. Kratos roared with intense passion, unleashing a powerful surge of blood-red energy. Aserat's stomach sank when she realized Kratos' plan for them both to share the lightning's heavy burden. The pair, broken by defeat, gave in to their fate. While this was happening, Saruthal watched from a distance through his magical glass ball. The famous overlord screamed in fear as his top helper, Fikamer, was officially turned into the next electro-grilled minion. The ugly, lonely demon king kept going, hitting again and again. Fikamer's screams rang out as his body twisted and fought against the powerful waves hitting him. Saruthal cried for the pain his helper was suffering through. Yet Kratos gave no mercy. The thunder cracked, and Fikamer's screams grew louder until they sounded like unholy noise, showing he was starting to take sadistic pleasure in it. Saruthal let out a loud, angry howl as he looked at this terrible and twisted mess. Just then, Kratos looked sharply to the side. A ghostly bird holding a glowing crystal appeared in the sky, proving that Saruthal was watching them. Rage burned hot inside him, knowing his crops were destroyed and the enemy was just laughing at him, so he promised to make Saruthal regret ever getting involved. By morning, the young Fluke was already digging deep into the earth. Aserat watched her from his cramped spot. He saw that her hands were rough and worn. The roasted warrior asked her why she was there. She quietly shared her wish to help, knowing that the Demon King, his 4 mighty generals, and everyone else were working so hard in the fields that she just wanted to pitch in. Aserat sneered, calling her a foolish, lowly demon kid, and grumbled that the idiot next to him had already farmed the spot she was digging, so he told her to pick somewhere else to work. Upon hearing this, Fluke beamed with gratitude and thanked Fikamer for plowing the field and stepping in to carry the lightning himself. Fikamer's eyes shined with tears as her words touched his heart, making all the pain feel like it was worth it. Aserat whispered darkly that the man had truly lost his mind, scoffing at the idea of farming in this dead land and pointing out that their absurd potatoes hadn't even sprouted because the cellar wasn't warm enough, and if that cold stayed, they were all doomed to starve. Fluke swallowed the words hard and sped off with a skip in her step, while Aserat rolled his eyes, sure a weak demon like her couldn't make a difference. In the middle of the day, Zephyrus felt a chill about the Demon King's plan, knowing Saruthal probably already spotted their trap and wouldn't dare show up to save Fikamer. But Kratos didn't expect anything at all. He expected Saruthal to send his minions first, so he planned to kill every last one to force Saruthal to act. He ordered his troops to leave no one alive, and now the farming squad stood guard around the second lightning pillar. As the reconnaissance wraith flew overhead, Saruthal sneered at Kratos' plan, convinced that keeping watch would be a waste of time. Even though it was a bad blow for Fikamer, Saruthal only cared about one thing: stopping the harvest. He sent his crop dusters out, and to no one's surprise, they showed up right in the middle of the potato pile where ghostly reptiles appeared. Then, without even a second's pause, the ghostly invaders charged straight ahead. Saruthal ordered his team to smash every single potato in the stockpile until not one was left standing. The Harvest Phantoms charged straight into the storage barn. They didn't realize that Kratos had seen exactly how things would play out. The crop specters were suddenly caught off guard. Perched high above, the Demon King waited. Kratos grinned slyly as he welcomed them like a host inviting guests to their final resting place. The ghostly invaders stumbled and paused, caught off guard by the surprise attack. His thoughts wandered back to those first scary meetings with these same creatures when he was just playing games, moments full of hopelessness. Saruthal's second-tier elite were dangerous because they loved to swarm together in huge crowds. Just one touch from their ghostly bodies could make someone grow old in a heartbeat. Even worse, they could copy the very skills their opponents already had, which made it a terrible curse. But Kratos, knowing how this world works, had already figured out how to beat them. He sneered with cruel joy, ready to roast the first of them, knowing that lightning was their only weakness. The ghosts saw they'd walked into a trap and started backing away. But Kratos warned them that the true trap had only just started. The ghouls caught a flash of red by the door, the blood Kratos had smeared there the night before. Kratos slammed his hand down to unlock his next move, sending surges of electricity through his veins that shot up like a lightning net and electrified the whole area. In that instant, the crop wraiths looked like helpless specks writhing in the air, and the strike hit them, making them scream silently even though they had no voices. Now that they couldn't fight back, Kratos called in his elite soldiers to deliver the final blow. These battle-hungry warriors charged into the fight with deadly tools, hiding their true strength behind a plane looked to become the most fearsome force on the final battlefield. Now that he understood the truth, Kratos stopped seeing the crop dusters as a danger. For the first time, he felt like a cold, calculating Demon King, scanning the area to find any ghost that had survived the attack. Knowing he had to end it himself, he got ready for his next step. Suddenly, a loud scream broke his concentration. As Flux slid out from under the giant pile of potatoes, Kratos froze in shock at her sudden arrival. A ghostly enemy locked its eyes onto her. While his father fought his own battle and couldn't reach her, an agitated Kratos forced himself to focus on killing as many fleeing phantoms as possible, yet he kept his eyes locked on Flux, knowing his red blast still wouldn't reach her. In a last-ditch effort, he threw a potato right at the ghost. Though he knew it was useless, instinct took over, sending the vegetable bouncing off the specter's head, where it was caught midair. To his surprise, the tuber started beating like a living catching ball. A swirling pink whirlwind wrapped around it until the creature's very soul was pulled inside. Then, with a sudden poof, a soft sound echoed through the air. A spirit popped out of the potato and bounced its way over to the food storage. While distracted, the leftover crop wraiths slipped away without anyone noticing. Kratos blinked, stunned by what he just saw. The potato had sprouted, and suddenly it became clear that these ghostly visitors were speeding up the aging process. They accidentally woke up the sleeping rhythm inside the potatoes. Kratos didn't hesitate for a second before pulling Flux into his arms. His eyes grew warm as he gave her a look that said she was doing great. Her body shook as she turned to her militia and called out for their attention. The moment to pull Saruthal out was gone. From now on, they would take the lead and strike first, because attacking would work much better for them. Over in another place, someone's eyes slowly opened to a blurry, confused view of lightning pole number 1. It was Azurat, his mind in a tangle as he tried to figure out who he was and what he was meant to do. The warm sun washed over his face, and for just a second, he felt thankful. Then his belly gave a loud, hungry rumble, reminding him that even in his weakness, a fierce desire to keep living still burned inside him. His attention snapped away when he heard someone calling out, "Flux!" She thanked him for his potato sprouting tip, which led to a great harvest of Chino and helped Kratos gather a huge army of farmers. By now, Azurat had stopped listening to her words at all. His eyes locked right onto the food she was holding. The instant he saw the tasty Chino in Flux's hands, his mind went blank and his stomach could only think about eating it. Flux knew his hunger and tossed him food, but it hit his eye, so he shouted angrily while she apologized and threw 3 pieces at once to get right. One piece slipped in his mouth, but the other 2 bounced right back on his eyes. Even though it hurt, tears filled his eyes not from sadness but from the amazing taste, and as he chewed, the sheer joy of it washed over him. Right then, Kratos got a notification that a member of his demon army had found joy, so 1 happy point went up. Kratos frowned, confused by how his total count of demons in Flux had jumped to 302 after the recruits ate the Chino, since he expected it to be exactly 300. He couldn't quite guess what extra happiness he'd found, so he brushed the thought aside to save his points for the big raid on Saruthal. He roused his soldiers, urging the cultivation warriors to push forward with burning passion for a bountiful harvest. Hours ticked by until they finally arrived at the gates of Saruthal's fortress. Saruthal, knowing the attack was coming, ordered his followers to cut the rope bridge right then. As the bridge gave way, the phantoms laughed at the demons coming toward them, hurling cruel insults their way. Kratos didn't hesitate and jumped across the gap, but the wraiths quickly realized his mistake and watched him fall. The phantoms burst into laughter, mocking him as brainless for trying such a crazy jump. Suddenly, the laughter stopped as they saw pieces of him stuck in the cliff with his backside showing, meaning his ultimate glitch move was now on. The spirits blushed in embarrassment as Kratos slowly climbed, twisting around and showing his backside with every turn. His face stayed dark and scary. Then with a few more twists, the demon lord climbed all the way up while the frightened ghosts groaned in disgust. Kratos pointed at Zephyros, showing that it was time for the next part of their plan. Zephyros nodded slightly, and Kratos burst through the door into the house. Based on his clever plan, the food spirits should have been scared of the potatoes, but by rushing in alone and without weapons, he made it much more likely they would walk right into his trap. Just as expected, Saruthal sent his ghostly food servants to attack, convinced the Demon King was weak without the cursed roots, and as the spirits charged forward, he believed victory was theirs for the taking. Kratos started a secret trick he called a quantum leap, which was really just a clever glitch that people started giving a fancy name to. Again, he merged with the ground, vanished as before, and left the wraiths confused and terrified until they finally caught him, only for him to disappear once more just as they were about to win. This was the 19th time Kratos pulled off his plan, having memorized every hiding spot in the landscape and standing right in the middle, completely surrounded by the food wraiths after he'd mapped out where every enemy would appear. Kratos took a deep breath and straightened up to face what was coming. Even the phantoms thought their mighty ruler was too tired to lead. Kratos decided inside his head that he wasn't a ruler anymore, but just a seasoned gamer. From far away, Zephyros shouted the signal to move on. Suddenly, troops rushed in from everywhere and fired at us, but instead of bullets, they were throwing potatoes. The tubers hit the ghost farmers right in the face, and at the same time, Kratos told them to get growing. A few more seconds ticked by, letting Zephyros fully soak in the moment's glory as his doubt melted away to reveal that the Demon Lord had once again found a perfect way to win. Earlier, Kratos told Zephyros to guide the sentries along a planned path while he trapped the crop wraiths in one spot, and as Zephyros studied the map of the old, dead waterway, it looked like nothing more than a dead end. Kratos insisted the secret passage was real, pointing out that he had found it himself. After crawling away from the deadly cliff of the dead and almost stepping into the final zone, he looked around closely and spotted something strange. Even though the place looked empty, everything felt carefully made, so he noticed a strange mark on the stone wall. Once he slashed the wall with his blade, and it swung open, revealing that the hidden corridor connected the battlefield where he first fought Saruthal to the deep cavern beyond, though he couldn't reach it until he had cleared everything around it. Only then could he finally claim the mysterious elixir of metamorphosis, an artifact he was told to find in the real world, though it was made from the spirits of many fallen souls and could only be drunk once with effects no one knew. Back in the present, the field hands cheered as they gathered the new sprouts, knowing it was time to plant them. Flut's dad looked at her with love, dreaming of the day they could finally eat a full meal together. As Kratos watched, his face grew dark as a painful memory of a hungry boy who was saved by a kind woman's promise of a warm meal flickered in his mind. The next day, he realized an ambulance was parked just around the corner. That dark memory twisted his face, but when he spoke up, the workers cheered.